It is September 16th, 2023. We are in the middle of week 2, and I am flying Ryan Gokers along with, as always.
Tampa Motormouth, Joel Verlin coming at you.
And we will talk about the game that happened on Thursday night, which was somehow a high scoring snore fest for half of it. Really sloppy game. Go
Yeah,
over some news and
because
then look
that
into week
that
2.
that first quarter definitely had you concerned if you were a Jalen Hurts owner, but then things worked out okay.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts, tough start, but a good finish. All right, let's go through some news because stuff is, of course, it's Saturday. You're getting some
Just
inactives already called out.
can't we just pretty much say everybody's injured and leave it at that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
The Rams activated from the practice squad running back Royce Freeman and wide receiver Austin Trammell. Of course, the injury to Puka Nakua. This could be a sign that he is going to be out. Royce Freeman, I'm not sure if that is
can you imagine everyone who
another injury.
dropped Fab on him?
If it's only one
Like
week, it's only 1 week, and that's not so bad. The
usually when you drop Fab, that's because you want to plug him in this week.
yeah,
Maybe it's
sometimes. The Jets are signing veteran kicker Austin Siebert to kick in place of Greg Zerline, who is injured this week. George Pickens hamstring injury limited today, so we will see. Deontay
mhm.
Johnson's already been ruled out, so that
What
would be another big loss for the Steelers.
the entire Steelers offense was limited last week.
Yeah, again, Deontay Johnson already out. Backup running back Anthony
But
McFarland out as well.
Deontay Johnson says he personally is day to day. But I don't think I'd put too much stock in that.
Yes, he is saying personally he is day to day, but the medical officials and the team are saying multiple weeks. So only time will tell on that one, I guess. DJ Chark expected to play against the Saints. That is the first game of the season for him. Possibility of a pitch count for him. Let's see. Chris Jones, the defensive tackle that was just brought back to the Chiefs, is going to be active on Sunday. Amari Cooper aggravated a groin injury today. He is now questionable for Monday Night Football. Kylan Granson added to the injury report with a hamstring. He's likely going to miss. Austin Eckler not
Uh,
expected to
I,
travel with the team to
if,
Nashville, so
if
almost
you're
certainly out.
if you're in Yahoo, grab Joshua Kelly. He's probably not available in sleeper, but there's some general consensus feeling that Eckler could still play, thus devaluing Joshua Kelly as
Again,
a plug-in.
to read it how it says, Chargers Austin Eckler is not expected to travel with
Not
the team.
expected.
Not expected to travel with the team. So he might not even be in Nashville. We'll find that out, I'm guessing, later today. CJ Stroud for the Texans popped up on the injury report, while wide receiver John Mechie is off the injury
Which,
report. He had a
which
cancer
early
concern.
start that if you have Joshua Kelly and let's say a flex of Chris Godwin, if you have some ridiculously good depth on a 10 teamer, are you doing Chris Godwin in with the better matchup, or are you rolling the dice with Joshua Kelly, boomer bust?
I think, given that the Chargers, where are they? They're playing Tennessee. Tennessee's got a pretty good run defense. As a team you beat through the air, I think you play Godwin against a very bad Bears team, and you hope for the best at that point because that's all you can really do.
Because the Bears,
The Bears still
bum.
suck. Yeah, they keep losing, and it just keeps getting worse
Yeah,
and worse
if
and
we had
worse.
clips, we would probably so overdo that one to death.
Every time they lost. Jerry Judy, not on the injury report, will play on Sunday. He'll make his season debut on Sunday. And then DeAndre Hopkins, ankle listed as questionable. I think he plays. Raheem Mostert was a rest day. No concern there. Buda Baker, surprise addition to the injury report for the Cardinals, so that defense gets a little bit weaker. James Conner, no injury designation.
If that's possible for it to get weaker.
I mean, their defense looked all right in week number 1. And I think that is it. Kendra Miller, limited in practice. Juwan Johnson upgraded to full on Friday, so he should be good to go.
And that's
Zach
true.
Moss,
The offense is definitely the question for the Cardinals than the defense.
yeah, Zach Moss off the injury report could be the lead back for this game, but I don't know. It's a good matchup against Houston. We'll see if it works out.
Yeah,
Travis Kelsey and Clyde Edwards-Helaire both questionable for Sunday.
game is basically definitely one of those blech, like
Yeah. Jacoby Myers is going to be out. Not a big surprise for that vicious hit he took. Matt LaFleur says rookie running back Emmanuel Wilson will be active if Aaron Jones can't play Sunday. So if you see anything about Emmanuel Wilson being active, you know where it's going with Aaron Jones. Mark Andrews expected to play, it looks like. And Cooper Kupp
which
hopeful to be
really
back after
absolutely
week 4.
really sucks fantasy wise because Aaron Jones probably won many weeks for managers in week 1.
Definitely helped. Puka Nacua will be questionable, but they do expect him to play, so maybe not so bad. And that's the big news for today. And then let's go and let's talk about that Thursday night football game.
Yeah, because
Dalton.
you had, of course, Kenneth Gainwell dominated the touches, but rib injury, little bit of a rib injury.
Yeah, a rib injury holds him out. So there was a lot of concern, a lot of uncertainty around this running back situation. Of course, they have DeAndre Swift, who had 1 carry week 1, Boston Scott, who had 1 carry week 1, and Rashad Penny was a healthy scratch. So I think a lot of people assumed it was going to be a pretty significant running back by committee, and it was not. DeAndre
DeAndre
Swift
Swift,
dominated the
yeah,
carries.
dominated is being kind.
177 yards and a touchdown. Got some receptions in that game as well. Was the beginning and end of the real offensive explosion because it was bad early. So let's go through the Eagles stats. DeAndre Swift, 28 carries for 175 and a touchdown. Also 3 catches for 6 yards. So a massive fantasy game. Jalen Hurts' passing numbers not great. 2 big plays, really most of the yardage. 18 for 23 for 193 yards, a touchdown to Devonta Smith, and an interception. But 12 carries for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. So,
And you had Rashad Penny, who definitely had the key whammy, preventing, of course, Brown from getting the touchdown
yeah.
from Jalen Hurts. So that could have helped a whole lot of fantasy nights, big
So
time.
let's talk about the good in the passing game. Devonta Smith, 4 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown. If you played him in fantasy, you were very happy. If you played against him, not so much. AJ Brown, though, more targets than Devonta Smith, but only 4 for 29. The good news, if you had Dallas Goedert in week 1, he didn't goose again. He was actually the leader in targets. The bad news is what it only totaled 6 catches for 22 yards. So if you're in a non-PPR league, that puts him in a grand total of 2.2 points so far in 2023. A little bit of concern there. Then we go to the Viking side of things. The Eagles do win this game 34-28.
You have to already, if you have any shares of Alexander Madison, you're realizing he's more of a volume back than a points back, even though can you give him bell cow role yet?
I think part of the preview was Tampa Bay had a very good defense last week in the front 7 against the run. The Eagles have possibly one of the top 3 front 7s to stop the run in the NFL as well. So going into this one, I think if you expected a 100-yard game out of Alexander Madison, a couple touchdowns, you were kind of hoping for something unusual. I think you were expecting better than 8 carries for 28 yards and 3 catches for 11 yards. So he did have a costly fumble in this one as well. Had another one called back due to penalty of fumble. So I think brighter days are ahead.
Are all of the comparisons to Dalvin Cook fair or unfair this early in?
Let's get a couple more weeks. I think Madison's going to be better in the next couple of weeks. I know he's got Chicago on the docket. That should be a big game for the Vikings. It's too early to say. If you see someone in your league saying this guy sucks, I want him off my roster, go get him on the cheap. He's going to have some good matchups coming up. But when they face a good defensive front, it's not going to be great. But he's had a couple monster games against Detroit. He's got 2 games against them going forward. Chicago's got a bad defense. He's going to get 2 games against them. Green Bay, we'll see, look better, but it was against the Bears. So we'll see this weekend how that run defense looks against Atlanta, which we'll talk about later.
And just one more player to toss out there. Jordan Addison, big week 1, but a little bit different story for week 2.
I mean, another big touchdown, a long touchdown reception, 3 for 72 and a touchdown, but the touchdown was about most of the yards. I think it was 62 yards. So only 5 targets. He is still getting into the role. KJ Osborne's got it for now. I think that will change as the season goes on. Don't sell on Addison. If you've got him on your rosters, hold. He's going to eventually take over KJ Osborne's spot, and he's going to be a very good receiver, but he's still a rookie, still making some mistakes. He's still got to get in the full rotation. Full stats, Kirk Cousins, 31 of 44, 364, and 4 touchdowns. Did have a costly loss fumble, but I mean, he played a pretty good game in prime time. I know we give Kirk Cousins a lot of crap for how he does things in the preseason, or in prime time, I should say, but not too bad. There were 4 lost fumbles in this game for the Vikings, 1 by Cousins, 1 by Madison, 1 by Brandon Powell on a punt return, and 1 by Justin Jefferson as he's going into the end zone. That he lost at the 1, went out of the end zone for a touchback turnover. So Justin Jefferson, 11 catches for 159 yards and a very near touchdown. So, yeah, you want better from Jefferson. You want a touchdown, but 159 yards, even with that fumble, is good, especially in PPR. Addison, as mentioned, 3 for 72 and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson, the big receiving game on the night, 7 for 66 and 2 touchdowns. If you're facing him in fantasy, you're in probably an early hole. Then Osborne, 3 for 34 and a touchdown as well. Eagles do win this game 34-28, but it did not look like a very good performance really on either side. I don't think you left that game going, wow, the Eagles offense looks great or their defense looks great. Just looks sloppy on all sides.
Yeah, you remember how dominant the Eagles were last year up to when they lost that Monday night against the Commanders. This year, all of a sudden, they're looking a little bit more mortal.
I mean, Eagles don't look like the buzzsaw that they started the year as last season. Jalen Hurts even said they're still looking for their offensive identity. Of course, 2 new coordinators, offense and defense. And I think you're seeing some of the issues early on just not being ready. This team has got a lot of talent, so I expect it to get better as the season goes on. So if you're a team like Buffalo, Miami, New England, who are going to play them this season because you're playing the other division in the NFC East, you want to get them earlier rather than later before they get rolling. Yeah, but Philadelphia moves to 2-0. Minnesota falls to 0-2, have lost both games in 1-score fashion, so that 11-0 is still self-correcting. And yeah, we'll see. Minnesota, if they fall out of this, I heard rumors that maybe the Jets call on Kirk Cousins for a trade at some point. Who knows? Maybe the Vikings just are ready to move on.
Have you seen the memes, of course, that Colin Kaepernick has reached out to the Jets, and then there was another one today that was a follow-up that the Jets have filed a restraining order against Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, Colin Kaepernick. I mean, the Jets were apparently kicking the tires on a bunch of vets. They do decide, hey, Zach Wilson is our guy. And apparently one quarterback that was very interested in coming to the Jets was Colin Kaepernick, but that interest was not returned. Oh, he's never going to go away, is he?
Yeah, can you just imagine? Just imagine the team that picks up AB as wide receiver and Colin Kaepernick as the quarterback. If you can imagine how much just media time will be spent every single week on that.
That'd be awful. Anyways, let's look ahead to week number 2. We both start the week 1-0, which is
better than last week.
Better than last week. Again, Joel had a 11-5 week. I had a 7-9. So both the board is updated behind me with 1 extra win on each side. First matchup, we're going to talk about Green Bay at Atlanta. 2 teams that are 1-0 and look pretty good over weaker competition in week number 1. Of course, Atlanta beating division rival Carolina and Bryce Young's first start. That offense did not look good, no real receiver threat. So we'll see what Atlanta's defense looks like going up against a much better Packers offense, even possibly without Christian Watson and Aaron Jones. The Packers beating the Chicago Bears soundly in week number 1, where pretty much anybody on the field was pretty good. Luke Musgrave looked like he could have a rookie season tight end breakout coming. Romeo Doubs, 2 touchdowns on 4 catches in very limited work. And Jordan Love, 3 touchdowns and was one of the best passers on the week. So I think for this one, if you have Jordan Love, he might not be in your starting lineup yet, but he is definitely a streaming option here. If Aaron Jones plays, Aaron Jones should be in your lineup. If not, A.J. Dillon is not a bad backup to have in this scenario. And then Romeo Doubs, if Christian Watson is out, Romeo Doubs has to be in your lineup, but keep an eye on that. Christian Watson probably going to be on a snap count if he plays at all. For Atlanta, it's just the running backs. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier should be in your lineup. Everybody else, put them on your bench. I don't care if you drafted Drake London or Kyle Pitts in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, and they should be, based on draft capital, your starting player. At this point, draft capital really doesn't matter. You're playing the best players, and those guys with Desmond Ridder are just not going to get it done. So, Joel, first pick of the Sunday. Who do you got, Green Bay or
Yeah,
Atlanta?
I know probably a little bit hashtag all crazy for this one, but one of the key stats out of last week was that Jordan Love only ended up getting hurried twice last week, which of course no wonder why he looked good. Anytime you don't get hurried, you can just sit back and like do. But interesting fact is that Atlanta advantage rushed Carolina quarterback 8 times last week. You have Aaron Jones out. I know they can just plug in A.J. Dillon. You also have Christian Watson out. So I think that's going to hamper Jordan Love just a little bit. You have a defense that's a little bit more competent than Chicago, which isn't too hard to do. So, call me crazy again. I'm picking Atlanta.
I believe Atlanta is favored at this point. I know it's open Green Bay -1, but I think it's swung to Atlanta with the Aaron Jones news. I think Aaron Jones and Christian Watson miss, and I'm still taking the Green Bay Packers in this one. I'm not convinced that Atlanta
Our
defense is as
first
good.
disagreement early.
Oh, get it going right off the bat. I'm just not convinced that Atlanta's defense is what they looked like in week number 1. Rookie quarterback, first start, no wide receivers, and unlike some of these other teams that didn't have wide receivers, the tight end is Hayden Hurst. So I think Atlanta's defense looks a lot better week 1 than it really is. And I think Green Bay, even though, yeah, they played Chicago, Jordan Love looked great in the preseason. He looked great in week number 1. And I just feel like they are still the better team in this matchup. I think A.J. Dillon, when he gets volume, is a much better player. So I don't think the loss of Aaron Jones is going to be a big thing. And we saw them get by just fine without Christian Watson last week in a massive performance. So I'm going to take Green Bay in what might be a kind of lopsided game if how I think it's going to happen comes to fruition. Next up, Las Vegas at Buffalo. Las Vegas 1-0, first place in the AFC West. Buffalo 0-1 after the disappointing loss to the Zach Wilson-led New York Jets. For the Raiders, you're going to play Devontae Adams. You're going to play Josh Jacobs, but that is probably the end of the list with Jacoby Myers out. For Buffalo, Josh Allen, he's going to be in your lineup. Definitely want to play him. Stephon Diggs definitely in your lineup as well. And then James Cook at running back should have some potential, but a little bit more of a risky play. And then you have Kincaid and Knox at tight end, which tight end's been terrible so far this year, so both are technically viable. At this point, if it's not Kelsey or Andrews, who both should be playing, basically all the next tight ends, put them in a hat, pull one out at random. They're playable. But Buffalo looked real bad against the Jets. They have to get things going against Vegas, or the panic's going to start real heavy in Western New York. So what happens here?
Yeah, I know you definitely have the case to go for the Raiders as Josh Jacobs is expected to heat up this week. But even taking into account the fact that the Jets literally built their defense to stop Josh Allen, and Then you have a question of Josh Allen's injury. So yeah, with the potential injury from last week, how much of a handicap is that going forward? How good can Jimmy G look against the Bills? And you're having a drop off from the Jets defense that was cream of the crop, the pillars last year and starting out pretty good this year. You're going to the Raiders defense. Yeah, so I know a lot of hype behind Josh Jacobs. I think the story of the day is Josh Allen. I think he rights the ship. They get back on track, and it's just hard picking the Raiders here. So you got to go with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I'm going to take Buffalo as well. I do think Allen plays a lot better than his 4 turnover performance against the Jets. It is a weaker defense. And when you have a guy like that losing the way they lost, I think that's going to hit home. It's going to motivate him for the next week. I do think Josh Jacobs is a great play, though. We saw Brees Hall tear up this Bills front seven, and I think Vegas has at least an equal offensive line in many ways. At least they didn't get their quarterback injured in week number 1 on the 4th play they had. So, I'm going to take Buffalo, but I think this could be a better game than we're expecting. I think Buffalo is possibly going to be in for a more difficult season than we predicted in the offseason. Next up, this is another big one. Baltimore and Cincinnati. Baltimore 1-0, Cincinnati 0-1 after a putrid first week performance. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins all accounted for basically nothing. Joe Mixon not far in front of them. All 4 of those are definitely playable in this matchup, but Baltimore's a stout defense, so it could be another tough game for the Bengals. For the Ravens, you're going to play Lamar Jackson. You're going to play Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews at this point. I think you can bench Bateman and Beckham. I don't know what you do at running back. I think it's going to be too much of a committee. You probably have a better option than Justice Hill or Gus Edwards at this point of the season, but you could find out a lot of information. This could be where Gus Edwards or Justice Hill takes control of this role, and going forward, that's the guy you want. But for right now, I would leave those guys on the bench. Big week. If Baltimore wins, they can get 2 up on Cincinnati right away. Cincinnati looking to avoid 0-2. What do you got?
Yeah, this is not exactly what one would call a sexy matchup where you might see a humongous fantasy performance. I expect to see maybe a little bit better. Of course, anything can be better than week 1, but hopefully a little bit better than week 1, especially when you're looking at last weekend. The Bengals as a team had 142 yards of offense and 6 first downs. Let me say that again. 6 first downs in the entire game. Very fairly beyond putrid. Now, while they tend to get a Ravens team that Burrow has not exactly torn up, keep in mind still that the Bengals did win 2 out of 3 against the Ravens last year. Plus, another interesting sign from last week is that Lamar only had 2 design runs in the whole game, a sign that maybe they're being a little bit more conservative. They don't want Lamar Jackson to get injured so they don't have to go to Tyler Huntley the last couple of games of the season. They want to keep now their star quarterback who got paid a crap load of money at the start of the year in for the entire season if they realize they have any hope of sniffing the playoffs. So I wouldn't call this as one of my great confidence picks, but yeah, I think I'm going to lean for Cincinnati. It's very hard seeing them going 0-2, as one's probably going to be shaking and bad enough for the Bengals nation as it is. I'm picking Cincy.
Yeah, I'm taking Cincinnati as well. Just like Josh Allen, when you have a bad week, you want to get back out there and right the ship right away. You mentioned Lamar Jackson only 2 design runs. I wonder how much of that was playing against the Houston Texans. I know that's a different animal because the Houston Texans are not great, and sometimes teams do different things. But I think Cincinnati's going to come in this game highly motivated. The Browns are the only team that other than Baltimore that come into this week 1-0 in the division. They can't do anything about the Browns, but they can knock the Ravens back to their level with a win. And I think Cincinnati gets done. Next up, Seattle goes to Detroit. Detroit beat the Kansas City Chiefs on opening night, banner raising night in Kansas City. Seattle fell to the Los Angeles Rams in surprising fashion week 1. I think this is going to be the highest scoring game of the week in all likelihood. So fire up your guys if you've got them. Ken Walker, Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, even JSN could get involved here. For Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown has to be in your lineup. I think Sam Laporta is a very good play. Jared Goff, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, all of them can be played this week. So this, I think, is going to be a very good, high-scoring game, a fantasy bonanza. The question is who gets the job done. Austin Eckler officially out. Anyways.
So who gets the job done? I know that you're looking at the Lions and you're saying, okay, they ended up beating the world champs last week, and now they're hosting the Seattle Seahawks. So any chance of a little bit of a letdown game? I say, heck to the no. Seattle was embarrassed. Detroit still has to be celebrating beating the Chiefs. I mean, I know you're going to have all the people who are going to jump on the Mike Tirico bandwagon and say, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They still got the job done. They still beat them. That was a hell of a win for the Lions. And you also have to remember last year that Seattle wasn't any good after the Germany trip and after they got absolutely embarrassed last week. Do you have sort of the same kind of hangover, even though it's not an international hangover? It's still a pretty bad hangover, and you just have to wonder, that you're looking at that Lions offense, you're going, okay, that they didn't put up a barn burner worth of points after game 1, only 14 points. But yeah, this might be the good way that you're going to see folks like St. Brown do their thing and the Lions start to look more like a Lions team that they were at the end of the year, that they were world beaters. And I think they get it done here, and I think they get a little bit of their swagger back. And yeah, so much, I don't know, whatever it was that Gino was drinking last year, he needs to get back to drinking some more of it this year. I'm going Lions.
Yeah, I'm taking the Lions as well, but again, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Defense need not apply type. I just think Detroit's got a little too much firepower right now, and I think they're going to get the job done. We saw them take on Kansas City last week, and you can say all you want about no Travis Kelce, no this and that. They still have a pretty good offense, a pretty good defense. I think Seattle's a step down on both fronts, but it's going to be a very high-scoring game, and I think Detroit gets the win.
You got to believe
Next,
Mr. Hawkinson is like, yeah, I think I like my new address.
yeah. Next up, not the game of the week, Indianapolis at Houston. Anthony Richardson, both teams 0-1, but he looked very good week number 1. Michael Pittman looked very competent as well. Zach Moss is a flyer play. You could have got him off the waivers. We'll see. Zach Moss is Zach Moss. So, yes, it's a great matchup. Yes, he might get a lot of work, but it's still Zach Moss. But he did have a running back 2 performance last year against the Houston Texans as well. So, we'll see. But I think that's about it. Pittman and Richardson, maybe Zach Moss. For Houston, I think you go Dameon Pierce. That run defense for Indianapolis didn't look great. And, end of list there probably as well. You could take a flyer on a Nico Collins, or maybe you really, really, really want to go crazy and pick a Tank Dell, or, I mean, any number of these guys. Robert Woods actually looks pretty good in week number 1, so maybe, just maybe, he is an option. But I just don't see anything really inspiring on the Texans side of things overall. John Mechie, if you want to have the story of the cancer survivor coming back, maybe, but not much in this game for fantasy.
Yeah, not much in this game for reality either, as you tend to sometimes have a paragraph or two about why you're picking a team. And in this case, it's just, neither one of these quarterbacks are leaping off and going, pick me, pick me, pick me. So my edge is going to be to Houston because of the Texans' defense. And that's pretty much one of the reasons why I'm picking the Texans. Plus, you also don't have the Taylor Sitch resolved with the Colts as of yet. So this case, I'm not liking it or loving it, but I'm picking the Texans.
I'm going to take the Colts mostly because I don't know CJ Stroud's health, and I do believe Anthony Richardson right now is a better player. Houston's got a better defense than we expected, but I also know that it's still the Texans. So I'm going to take the Colts. This is a hold your nose and pick 'em type of game, and we are going to disagree on this one. And we move to the next one. Kansas City at Jacksonville. A repeat of a playoff matchup last year that the Chiefs won 27-17. Kansas City comes in 0-1. Jacksonville 1-0. For the Chiefs, you're playing Pat Mahomes. You're playing Travis Kelce. It's tough to even recommend a Pacheco at this point because he was very, very poor in week number 1. But he's at least on your radar. For the Jaguars, you're going to play Trevor Lawrence. Might not sound like the best play, but he was great week number 1 until that game was out of hand. Travis Etienne is going to be very good as well, and Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones at least have to be considered. Evan Ingram at tight end, not too bad as well. So with all of the fantasy options for the Jaguars and a limited amount on the Kansas City side, do we have a potential upset brewing here?
Yeah, maybe you could make the case ATS, but straight up, since 2018, the Kansas City Chiefs are 13-3 flying after a loss, outscoring opponents by 12 points per game. Add to that in the fact that the Jags have cluster injuries on their offensive line, lost yet another lineman. That's not a recipe setting the Jaguars up for a good day either in fantasy nor in reality. But though still, if you have like Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, you're going to play them. You're going to start them. You're not starting Kenny Pickett over Trevor Lawrence, even with the cluster injuries. But yeah, it's hard to make a case for the Jaguars in this game. Got to look for a Chiefs bounce back.
I'm taking the Jags.
Hmm.
I didn't like what I saw from Pat Mahomes week number 1. He was magical
You're,
getting out of the pocket and
you're,
making plays work,
you
but
want the Chiefs to go 0-2.
I mean, selfishly as a Dolphins fan, yeah, the further back they get, the better. But Kadarius Toney couldn't catch a pass. Sky Moore was terrible. I mean, Rashee Rice seemed to be their wide receiver 1. Yes, I know they're going to get Travis Kelce back, but if a team has any sense, they can't run the ball that well. They can't count on their receivers to catch the ball. So double team Travis Kelce and make the other receivers beat you, and don't let the running game just destroy you. And you could probably shut down this offense well enough. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's heating up. He's getting better. And I just think the Jags are possibly at this point of the season a better team. I think Kansas City badly needs a number 1 wide receiver, a true number 1 wide receiver that's not a rookie Rashee Rice or an MVS who hasn't been a number 1 in his career ever. But it's just tough. And maybe if Kadarius Toney starts catching passes, I change my tune real quick on Kansas City. But I didn't love what I saw week number 1, and I'm going to take the team that looked better week 1. We're still trying to figure out a lot of these teams, and maybe, just maybe, Kansas City is going to have a tougher year than we expected.
Well, this is the legit week 1 as opposed to last week, which was still really mentally preseason week 4.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Next up, Chicago goes to Tampa Bay to play the Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Chicago coming off a very poor loss, not the worst looking loss of the week because thanks Cincinnati, thanks the Giants. But still a loss none all the same. Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, a little more of a timeshare than we were hoping for, so probably neither of them can be played. Again, Tampa has a great run defense anyways. I think Justin Fields and DJ Moore are primed for better days, and then Cole Kmet again. If it's a tight end and he's a starter, he can be played in fantasy because the tight end is a toilet. The position is just a toilet outside of Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews and T.J. Hockenson this week. So for Tampa, Evans, Godwin definitely in your lineup. I think Rachaad White and even Baker Mayfield should get some consideration because we saw what Jordan Love did in Chicago last week. I think Baker Mayfield could have a solid day similar to what Jordan Love had last week. So who gets the win here?
Yeah, it's as pedestrian sometimes as Tampa Bay can look. And you tend to look at yards per play that Vikings last week, 5.9 yards per play, Tampa 3.6. But Tampa did win the turnover battle, and Bucks not much better this week than they were a week ago, but they won. And yeah, Vikings are a lot better team than the Bears are. Evans, Godwin, they're ready. You just hope that Rashad White and Sean Tucker can kind of get their act together, but this is a good team for them to do that. Yeah, it's just it's hard picking the Bears. You had all the hype. They fell flat on their face last week. I don't know if we're going to see as big a win as the Packers had over the Bears that the Bucks will, but I think it's going to be a pretty good win nonetheless. Gotta go Bucks. I was definitely pleasantly surprised
I
last week.
have some real concerns with the Bucks long term with the running game because we saw what the Eagles did to the Vikings on the ground. The Bucks couldn't get it going, but we are not talking about either of those levels of competition this week. We are talking about the Chicago Bears. You got to take the Bucks in this one. Again, I think Mayfield could have a 3-touchdown game. This could be a good one for Godwin and Evans. I think the running game gets a little bit better, but I do have concerns full season when they play some of these better defenses that it just won't be there and it'll be a little bit one-dimensional, and they'll put all the weight on Baker Mayfield, which has not been historically good. But I'm going to take Tampa Bay as well just because, well, it's Chicago, and I hope Justin Fields looks better this week than he did in week number 1, especially with all the people that got him in fantasy, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you took a shot on a guy who looked great second half of the season. Maybe it's going to be one of those things. It takes a couple weeks for him to get into the groove again. But again, I want to remind everybody, Austin Eckler last year through the first 2 weeks was horrific, and he ended up being a league-winning type of player. So don't panic on the fantasy side of things. But I do think this week for Chicago is not going to be a great matchup. And I think Tampa Bay gets the job done. Next up, the Chargers go to Tennessee to play the Titans. Both teams 0-1. The Chargers and Titans both lost very close matchups last week. Chargers to the Dolphins by 2, the Titans to the Saints by 1. Ryan Tannehill looked like the worst player in football this week. He is not on your fantasy radar whatsoever. I think at this time, it's Derrick Henry for the Titans, fantasy-wise, and nothing else. For the Chargers,
So you're not thinking Burks is a good play at all.
if Hopkins misses, he's probably a better DFS play than your normal fantasy league play, just because, well, he could pop off and he's going to be a zig when everybody else is zagging. Um, I I want to see it first, and the way Tannehill looked last week, maybe Chigakonkwo gets involved again. Tight end, you can throw him in; it doesn't matter after you get past the first couple. But it's tough to believe a whole lot of Tennessee is going to be going. The Chargers are a defense that can be beaten though, so maybe this isn't as bad of a matchup. But no, I'm not buying Burks, but he could technically be on your radar as well. For the Chargers, Herbert, Allen, and Mike Williams all heavy recommend to play Donald Parham at tight end as well. You beat the Titans by throwing the ball. They've got a powerful offense that we saw last week. I think they can get the job done through the air.
The ball
Joshua
is that
Kelly,
weirdly shaped brown thing, I think, right?
yeah. Joshua Kelly, Tennessee's got a good run defense. Not all world, but it's good enough where I would hesitate if you have better options. I think if AJ Dillon is the starter, you would rather have AJ Dillon against Atlanta than you would Joshua Kelly against Tennessee. But there are going to be some guys that, I don't know, you lost J.K. Dobbins week 1, you picked up Joshua Kelly. He's a fine option in that scenario, but you're going to have to weigh your options in that one. This one is a big game for one of these teams to avoid going 0-2 who gets done.
Yeah, I know. You can look at both sides of the ball in this matchup, and you look at the Chargers, you're kind of cringing a little. Health of the Chargers definitely a concerned, fragile team. Eckler banged up now, as you said, not going.
Officially out.
Williams has a concussion, so that's two of their key playmakers already not at 100% health. But of course, Justin Herbert is at 100% health, and if he has Joshua Kelly and Keenan Allen, he could get something done. And I would tend to have a little bit more confidence in that. Yeah, I know you're wincing, but we remember what Tennessee didn't do last week, and their offense all runs through the, as they're called, the Tennessee Derrick Henry's and Tannehill is atrocious, and until he proves otherwise, I'm not going to feel real confident because of the injuries, but I'm taking the Chargers in this case.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Chargers as well. Williams was evaluated for a concussion, but did not have one, so that's good news for him. But I do expect the Chargers to win this game. I think it's going to be more competitive than you might think after watching both teams in week number one. I think Derrick Henry has to get more involved than he did the first week of the season because Ryan Tannehill carrying the load has never been the way to win with him. You have to get the ground game involved. You have to get the play action passing, and without getting the running game involved, that play action is not efficient. So I'm going to take the Chargers as well. And I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a closer game, but Chargers are going to get the win. Next up, two teams that looked real bad in week one. The Arizona Cardinals host, even though they didn't get a touchdown on offense, the worst offense in football after week one, the New
Like,
York Giants.
yeah, like you called them the turds last year, I'm anointing them the Cardinals this year.
Yeah, the turds were the Commanders before the Commanders got their name, and they're still kind of turds because it looks like turds. But the Cardinals 9 points offensively, all field goals, outscored the Giants 9-0 offensively because the Giants didn't score a damn point. Now, Cardinals defense, no Buda Baker possibly this week. It's going to be a softer defense. For the Cardinals, Ertz, because he had a ton of targets week number one, could be an option, but Dobbs was bad. I think if you have Hollywood Brown, he's probably going to be in your starting lineups, but I don't know if I count on him to be good. For the Giants, Darren Waller and Saquon Barkley. I think that's the beginning and end. Daniel Jones in a super flex is probably a good option here as well. But we saw that Cardinals defense, 6 sacks last week, was pretty solid. So who gets the win?
Yeah, after everybody is going to probably be feasting on a Saquon props, I have a feeling this week, if anybody is doing some short term investing, that yeah, I know as god awful as the Giants looked last week when they got shut out, and they looked god awful as you you just pointed out. Yeah, Arizona cannot move. So even though yeah, you're starting Marquise Brown in fantasy football, but Arizona might have covered last week, but often scored what 9 points in last week's game. Nine. That's not exactly a number that offers confidence if you're going. Yeah, I want to take a chance and roll the dice, and I want to go with Arizona. So I know as much as you're looking at all the stink over in New York, I think that they're in a they want to right the ship game. They were embarrassed on national freaking television last week. This is the absolute perfect matchup. You have Daniel Jones, you're wanting him to have a better week. If you're wanting Darren Waller to return to his normal stature, I think that happens this week. It's hard to pick Arizona. I'm picking the G Men.
It's impossible to pick Arizona. I mean, Joshua Dobbs did not look like he was getting the job done. I expect to bounce back from the Giants. They aren't as bad as they looked week one. I think Matt Dallas has a good way to beat them, and that's just kind of the deal with that matchup.
Pummeling
Arizona's
them to the
terrible.
ground infinitely.
Yeah, Arizona's terrible. I mean, you could go after a James Conner just
Horrible.
because he's going to get a lot of work, but I don't trust this Arizona offense. I trust the Giants a little bit more, so I'm going to take the Giants as well. And we move on. San Francisco goes to the Los Angeles Rams to play to see which one of these teams can go to 2-0. If you have anybody on the Niners, Purdy, McCaffrey, Ayuk,
Pretty good start.
yeah, even Debo and Kittle, who are disappointing week one, I think they're all able to be fired up in this matchup. For the Rams, Cam Akers, Kyron Williams both had different week ones, but not too bad. If Puka Nacua plays, I think he's going to be a risky play just because of that defensive matchup. And then, Tyler Higbee could be a tight end play here as well. But I think with the Niners defense, the Rams offense is going to have a hard time getting going. The real question here is, can the Rams slow down the Niners? If so, it's going to be a good game. If not, San Francisco might roll once again. Who gets the job done?
Yeah, when it's a 10-3 Shanahan versus McVay, it's very hard, and especially when you know it's probably going to be a lot more of a touchdown, CMC or Ayuk. Ayuk is on fire. I think that's the only thing we heard pretty much all last week when we were listening to football. It's still ringing in my ears. So hard time picking the Rams here. Got to pick with the 49ers, and they roll on.
Yeah, Niners get the job done here. I think their defense stymies Matt Stafford a little bit. Better game than you might think, but I do think this is Ayuk, Samuel, and CMC getting the job done. Brock Purdy possibly another
Yeah,
great
49ers
game.
have so many weapons, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, for fantasy, I mean, the concern with Brock Purdy is that this game gets out of hand, they start handing the ball off. And that's going to be a lot of their games, actually. Next up, New York Jets going to Dallas to play the, I think it said 49ers, taking the 49ers. Jets going to Dallas to play the Cowboys. Cowboys defense looked possibly
Can
best in the
can
NFL.
we do a, semi-sport shuffle non sequitur, and hopefully this isn't going to be your final thought. What do you think about Aaron Rodgers wanting to come back again?
I'm not surprised. We'll see if it happens. I'm not surprised. A competitor like that's not going to want to just vanish off the face of the earth and go out like that. But at the same time, it's an Achilles injury. He is pushing 40. NFL athletic wise, he is an old man. Real world wise, he's middle aged. That's not what you want to be in the NFL, though. Now, he was on McAfee basically guaranteeing he's going to come back. He was talking about the rehab being non traditional, including dolphin sex noises involved. If you didn't see the interview, it is on YouTube. I swear I'm not making that up. Dolphin sex noises are possibly part of the rehab. And there's a story on
Hey,
NFL.com.
do we need a Peggy 18 thing, to appear on the screen?
Maybe. And then there's an article at NFL.com basically saying Rodgers on timeline. Rehab plan will shock some people. So he is definitely planning on coming back. We'll see. We'll see what that looks like. But there's a lot of different ideas about the overall length of rehab. I think what I'd like to say is just because nobody's ever done it in a certain way doesn't mean it's not possible. Definitely have some odds stacked against me based on age, but I'd like it. Stack all the odds up against me and see what happens. My entire focus and dedication is about acquiring the most information and adding to what I already put together as a pretty damn good rehab plan that's going to, I think, shock some people. Again, full 30-minute or so interview with the Pat McAfee show is on YouTube, where I swear to God they mentioned dolphin sex and dolphin sex noises as part of this.
Ah,
If you don't believe me, it's about 20 or so minutes in. Go watch it for yourself. I am not making that up. But he is expected to miss the rest of the season. So the Jets are going to go with Zach Wilson against a very good Dallas Cowboys defense. I think if it's named Brees Hall, who's going to be on a pitch count again, you might be able to play him this week. But I think other than that, this Jets offense is primed for a rough week. However, the Jets defense, I think, might actually be better than Dallas's. And if anybody is a risk to stumble and turn over the ball, Dak Prescott is on the short list. So I'm going to say for Dallas, you're playing Tony Pollard, you're playing Brees Hall for the Jets. I think you have to play CeeDee Lamb for where you drafted him, but don't expect a monster game out of him. And then Jake Ferguson, tight end, throw him in the bag, pick one out at random, play him. So he's in the mix as well. I don't think he's a great play this week with the Jets defense, but it's at least an option. So 2 1-0 teams with very different vibes coming out of week one. Who gets the win?
yeah, this one is very, very cut and dry. I don't think you tend to need even a paragraph to talk about this one. Zach Wilson, not good. Dak Prescott, good, at least when you're looking at both teams right now. The Jets are sort of riding on a very emotional roller coaster that went up last week. Think it's going to go down this week. I'm picking Dallas.
I can summarize this matchup in one sentence. With Aaron Rodgers, the line was Dallas -3. Home team typically gets 3 points. Without Aaron Rodgers, the line was 9.5 in favor of Dallas. I'm taking the Cowboys as well. You just don't have it with Zach Wilson.
How about them Cowboys?
I mean, you've beaten Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson weeks 1 and 2. Let's pump the brakes on We Dem Boys. It's our year. You're going to have games against the Eagles. You're going to have games with probably some of the other best
Someone
teams in the
someone is still
NFC.
going to punch their TV out coming
You're
for
you're
coming in the
playing
season.
Miami, you're playing Buffalo, you're playing New England, who all look pretty well. Two of the three looked really good in week one, and Buffalo, we assume, is still a really good team. So pump the brakes. When you beat Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson, it's okay. You're 2-0. Good job. But let's not get over hyped. If it's another blowout, yeah, that defense is legit, but you still beat two of the bottom quarterbacks in the NFL. Let's see how you do if you play the 49ers or the Rams, who look like they might be in a
Word.
resurgence. Green Bay, Minnesota, who held tight with the Vikings, even Tampa, who held tight, and some of the teams in the NFC South. So I'm taking Dallas, of course, but let's pump the brakes on the "we them boys, this our year" crap. Last game before we get to the night, and there are two Monday nighters this week and a Sunday nighter. So Washington at Denver, another not game of
Because
the week.
hashtag NFL scheduling. Why?
I know I hate the two Monday night thing. I'll talk more about that in final thoughts. But
Okay.
Washington goes to Denver after a win in Arizona to face the 0-1 Denver Broncos, who look better in an exactly same score loss as week one last year to the Raiders. For the Commanders, I got nothing. I don't know if you want to play anything in this team. Brian Robinson, I saw an ESPN, and I'm high on Brian Robinson. I am. I saw an ESPN thing saying you must start him in this matchup. I'm like, no. Josh Jacobs got held to less than 50 yards against this Denver defense. I'm not playing Brian Robinson here. You can go after Dotson or you can go after McLaurin, but I mean, unless you're in a deeper league, it's kind of tough. Denver's got a really good defense. And then for the Denver side of things, this might be an avoid at all cost game. I think Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are options. Super flex leagues, I think Russell Wilson's in play. Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine in a timeshare still. So this could be an avoid at all cost fantasy game. With that said, who we got?
Yeah, I wish this could be avoid at all cost reality game if we actually had the option to go pass in this game. I think this is one of those games that I would put it past, but no, we's gotta pick them. So yeah, when you see how the Commanders did last week, and when you see how the Denver Broncos did last week, and who both teams played, especially the fact that the Commanders played the Cardinals. Yeah, I'm holding my nose. I'm picking the Broncos and hoping that Russell Wilson doesn't turn over any golf carts.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Broncos as well, mostly because both these teams looked competent or comparable in their games last week, but I think Vegas is a much better team than Arizona, so I'm going to take Denver to win this one in what might be the worst game of the week for watching. Remember
We
last year we
haven't
had
been waiting all night for it.
no, we haven't been
It
waiting all
doesn't
day
work.
for that one. We've been waiting all day for the next one we're going to talk about. That's Sunday Night Football. The Dolphins go to New England to try and start 2-0, both games on the road against the division rival in New England, put New England at 0-2. For the Dolphins, you are going to fire up Tua. You are going to fire up Tyreek. You are going to fire up Jalen Waddle. You're going to play all three of those. Raheem Mostert, maybe not. Depends on your roster. For New England, Ramondre Stevenson might be about it. Yeah, maybe Zeke gets a sniff at some point, but Mac Jones, I don't think is going to repeat his performance from week number one. This is a divisional matchup. Both teams know each other well, so I don't expect it to get too out of hand for Mac Jones in that offense. The wide receivers are a complete mess. Maybe Kendrick Bourne, but I'm not counting on any of that. You beat the Dolphins on the ground, it looks like, and that means Ramondre Stevenson would be about it. Who do you got?
Yeah, you can make a whole lot of case about travel and the Dolphins, and because they've got 8,000 travel miles from Miami, zero for New England, as New England is home for their second straight game. You can also make the case that Bill Belichick is going to take away Tua Tagovailoa's best weapon, in this case, Tyreek Hill. As Belichick straight up 18-5 at home. But in the 20, and I tend to think that the Dolphins just have something to them this year, especially after they were able to do that to the Chargers last week, as that was a hell of a good game. You really wish both teams could have won. That was a contest for the year already in week one. There's been a lot of question, can Tua's output remain sustainable for the rest of the year? Well, this is a time to find out. This is a good test to find out. We saw how the Patriots played the Eagles last week and stymied them at times. So Belichick can figure teams out, and he has their numbers literally and figuratively. I just tend to think that Tua Tagovailoa is better than Mac Jones, and I tend to think that this offense is better than the Patriots defense, who has regressed considerably since they were in their prime many, many years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots upset the Dolphins, but I'm picking the Dolphins to win this game.
I'd be shocked if the Patriots upset the Dolphins. The Eagles' offense has not looked great through 2 weeks, and that includes playing a team like Minnesota, whose defense looked horrible until they just started pounding the rock. At least they looked bad. So I don't know how much of that New England defense shutting down the Eagles narrative I want to buy into. Miami's offense looked unstoppable. So if you want to go and double team Tyreek Hill, make sure they can't go over the top, then Jalen Waddle's going to burn you underneath. I think they just are too powerful offensively. Tua is 4-0 against New England in his career. I don't expect a loss here. So I'm going to take Miami in what should be convincing fashion. Where on Monday, we're maybe looking at this team going, maybe the Dolphins are that team this year. And I will say this about week one, Miami. It reminded me a lot of the first season with Pat Mahomes going to the Super Bowl and winning it for the Chiefs, where the offense was almost impossible to stop and the defense was iffy. And the defense got it figured out at some point. And I think if that's what happens with the Dolphins, you are looking at a really, really bright season. All right, first Monday night game, because of course there's two this week, and I think it's two next week too. New
Yeah.
Orleans at Carolina. New Orleans defense looked fantastic week one, going up against a rookie quarterback in week two. I think the defense is definitely in play here. And then Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson, I think you can play both of those guys. Even Michael Thomas might be worth a flex consideration. Rashid Shaheed even had a big game in week number one. For Carolina, I think Miles Sanders at least has to be considered, if not in your starting lineups. He is a very good player, but that might be it for New Orleans. So who do you got in this one?
Oh yeah, you're looking at both of these teams and you're trying to figure out if they can figure themselves out as just, yeah, were you impressed? Were you disappointed with Carr after his debut with the team last weekend? On the other hand, you're not really trusting Bryce Young much at all, as both of these teams, they're sort of they're trying to figure out what their identity is, and Saints.
And there goes Joel. It was so close. Um, I'll make my pick in the meantime. I think the Saints get the job done here. They are just the better defense, better offense, and Joel is back in 3, 2, 1, and back to Joel.
Apparently, also the connection is trying to find its identity as well. But yeah, you're looking at the Saints just got a little bit lucky holding King Henry for the most part, and it's hard seeing Bryce Young doing absolutely anything really against the Saints, and the Saints still looked that good in some cases against the team that was really utter crap with the Titans last week. So yeah, definitely one of those games I don't think you're really flocking to. This is probably another one of those games. If I could pass, I would, but I can't, so I'm picking the Saints.
Yeah, I'm taking the Saints as well. I just think they're the better team in this matchup. The defense is going to cause Bryce Young some problems. I think they'll get the ground game going a little bit better this week. Derrick Henry did average over 5 yards a carry. So I think Miles Sanders could be something, and they need to ride Miles Sanders in that Chuba Hubbard backup running game as best they can to maintain competitiveness. But I think the Saints are just too good. We're going to start to see Derek Carr look a little bit better behind the helm, and I think the Saints win fairly easily in what will probably be the least watched Monday Night Football game of the two.
Mm.
The second one, though, Cleveland at Pittsburgh. Cleveland, an impressive win over the Bengals in week 1, are 1-0. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, honestly, if it wouldn't have been for the Giants, would have been the team after week 1. Everybody was looking at it like, what is wrong with them? This team got blown out. No Deontay Johnson, possibly no George Pickens, which means wide receiver 1, Allen Robinson could be what the Steelers have. So,
good God, I think I'm starting him in one of my fantasy leagues.
That's not ideal. But the question is, who gets the win on this game?
Oh, yeah, because I know you're having a lot of people going. Cleveland's offense was not good. Some people are saying, okay, this is a potential phenomenal spot for Pittsburgh, but it's still Pittsburgh. And I think the Browns, Deshaun Watson is slowly starting to figure things out. And Steelers don't have Deontay Johnson, of course, even though he says he's day to day. I think it's more like week to week. They really couldn't get anything going and trying to figure out where Najee Harris was last week. So, yeah, I know you tend not to have a lot of like, oh, yeah, don't blink, don't think, and pick the Browns. But I would think to at least don't blink and pick the Browns, because please don't even think about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not until they show they are ready and they have something worthy of picking them. I'm going Browns.
I'm going to take the Browns as well. I think the Steelers are just going to be missing way too much with Deontay Johnson and possibly George Pickens out. Cleveland's front seven is going to be very good, shutting down Najee Harris and putting a lot of pressure on Kenny Pickett. I just think low-scoring game most likely, but I think the Browns get it done once again. All right, so that's our picks for week number 2. Joel, final thoughts, go.
Final thoughts actually is something germane. I know that's hard to imagine it, but if fantasy football for you tends to be a little bit of the same old, stale, then might want to try switching up your format and also switching up where you play, as this was the first year that I've ever played fantasy football on Sleeper, and trying out the Megalo Bowl was the first year I've ever played without any kickers on a team, because I'm going ahead and I'm picking. I'm like, well, okay, that's the last 2, so I need to pick a kicker. I'm like, oh yeah, no kickers. So, and also, and with this format, you can't trade in season like most leagues. So that's kind of interesting. It's a 12-team league, so you tend to have a bigger pool to pick from when it's time to spend some of that fab. So that's just my final thought for today. Try a different site. If all you do is Yahoo, try Sleeper. Try somewhere else, and try a different format. You may be surprised on how different it really can be. And that's my final thought.
Have you been converted to no kickers?
I don't know about no kickers, but I'm thinking about it. It's kind of nice. You just have another dart throw pick, as opposed to, you don't know, is this kicker going to get you 5 points, 20 points, or are they going to get you this week?
Kickers are completely unpredictable. That's the case for getting rid of them. And Joel laid it out without meaning to. Yeah, my final thought is going to be Monday Night Football doubleheaders. If you're going to do it,
why
6 and 9 p.m. Start one early after people get home from work on the East Coast. They want to get the entire nation's audience for both games. And unless you're going to do a Las Vegas LA Chargers game like they usually do when they do a doubleheader, where it's a West Coast centric game and it starts at 10:15 or 10:30. And the other one starts at 7:15, like the first one this week.
Keep in mind, this is a work night for a lot of people, so that's a brutal schedule.
Yeah, to put 2 games on simultaneously on Monday Night Football, which is just kind of obnoxious. If you happen to have Sunday ticket, you'll probably be able to watch both at the same time, but that's about it. And if you don't have it, then you're probably going to have to keep flicking back and forth and just either separate them out where they are separate, like you'll maybe miss the first 5 minutes of the second game because the first one's wrapping up kind of thing, or just do one game on Monday night. We're not clamoring for an extra Thursday night game. We don't want an extra Sunday night game. We don't really need an extra Monday night game either. So
Agreed.
that's my final thought. Either separate them where we can watch them both, or just leave it to one. There's 2 games next week. Bucks Eagles is one of them, and Rams Bengals is the other. By the way, for Monday Night Football. So yeah,
Would you rather have 2 games on Monday night and no Thursday night football, or one Monday night game, one Thursday night game?
I'd rather have a Monday and a Thursday. I can watch both that way very easily, and it's just nice. And you don't go from Monday to Sunday with nothing. So I like the Thursday. I mean, the football is not always great, but I like the Thursday night slot. So you have football in the middle of the week. It breaks up the 5-day stretch that we would have otherwise. So I like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting New Orleans and Carolina in the 4:15 window this week. It'd be fine. Anyways, that's our time. We'll see how these picks go. We have one.
And we'll see how much USF loses by.
Yeah, I'm expecting by about 50. I think we have 3 or 4
Yeah.
disagreements this week, so we'll see. It could be a big lead for Joel. A 3.
Let's see what I'm looking what the official spread is for USF once this wonderful screen loads.
It's going to be Alabama minus 34, and I'm going to take Alabama and give up the points, I think.
Okay, as my college football feed doesn't want to load from the site. Yay!
Yeah. Side note, we mentioned it a couple nights ago. Rays Orioles big series. The Rays won the first 2 and pulled into a virtual tie. They are about 1/1000th of a winning percentage behind the Orioles.
And
so
I'm assuming you've seen the baseball news that Shohei Ohtani just cleaned out his locker, of course.
Yeah, Shohei Ohtani's shut down for the rest of the season due to an oblique injury that goes on top of the UCL injury he already had. So Rays Orioles tonight will determine who's in first place going into Sunday. If the Rays can win, it'll be the first time in a long time they've had the lead. If
Bonus final thought: isn't it nice seeing the Red Sox and Yankees at the bottom of the division?
It's definitely nice to see the Yankees down there. Yankees and Red Sox combined playoff potential odds combined 0.6%. So yeah, we're getting down to the stretch. We have about 150 games played. The Orioles 147, the Rays 149. So Rays 150th game tonight. So they only have 13 more total if you include tonight's game. And we'll be in the postseason before you know it. So the Rays.
And shockingly, Bryce Harper went ballistic on an umpire. That, of course, as before, never happened.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the Braves just clinched the NL East. Not a big surprise. They're 16 up already. Colorado, Oakland, Kansas City, and the White Sox eliminated, and everybody else still in at least some semblance of a chance. Not a good chance, but still some semblance of chance.
And if you ever want to try driving yourself absolutely insane, try picking baseball games. Oh my good God.
Baseball and hockey, they're just too random to pick. Just because a hot goalie or a hot pitcher can just change the game entirely. Anyways, again, Rays Orioles tonight, a big game in the Major League Baseball for playoff seeding because, of course, the division winners and then the wild card teams get a vastly different path in the playoffs. Winner of the AL East is going to be the number 1 seed in the AL. So big series there. We'll see how that tracks. And anyways, I am Flying Ryan Gilchrist along with
Tampa Monmouth, Joel Verone.
We'll be back next week to recap week number 2. Look ahead to Thursday night football for week number 3.
See how many more players are injured.
Because you know what? Why not? It's got to get better. Week 1's always a bloodbath because people are coming in out of training camp. Like you said, preseason week 4. It's got to get better, right? Right. With that, we gone.